At the southern tip of the Florida Keys is Key West, where you'll find a mix of laid-back atmosphere, vibrant energy, and plenty to see and do. With sparkling waters, boat trips, amazing sunsets,
That's gonna be a good one right here.
chickens, historical forts, beautiful gardens, awesome architecture, more chickens, key lime pie, live music, abundant happy hours, and even more chickens. Key West was one of those places we never wanted to leave. My husband Aaron and I spent 7 fun-packed days covering as many attractions and experiences as our leisurely pace would allow. By the end of this video, I hope you'll not only have plenty of ideas for your own trip, but you'll also understand why we absolutely loved Key West. We started our first full day in Key West with the Conch Train. The tram trundles for about 75 minutes through the old town of Key West, with the driver providing a narrated tour of the history, people, and architecture. They also highlight sites and activities that you might want to visit while you're on the island. It's a great way to familiarise yourself with the old town, as well as learning some interesting facts along the way. For example, we found out why Key West homes have metal roofs, why some houses appear to have eyebrows, and why there are so many chickens. The Conch Train is a hop-on, hop-off tour with 4 stops around the old town. We went on the train mainly to enjoy the narrated tour and get the lay of the land, rather than using it as a way to get around, so we just did the loop in full and then got off. If you'd like to use the Conch Train as a mode of transport as well, then you could also consider the Old Town Trolley, which goes further around the island and covers more stops. I'll go into the pros, cons and differences between the Old Town Trolley and the Conch Train in a future Key West tips video. Given its location, Cuba has had a big influence in Key West, and you'll find plenty of great Cuban dishes to try. We started with a Cuban sandwich from Key West Cuban Coffee Shop. It consisted of Swiss cheese, pork, salami, mustard, pickle, lettuce and tomato on delicious toasted Cuban bread. One between 2 of us was plenty. Later in our trip, we also visited a casual Cuban restaurant called El Cibone, where we had shredded beef and grilled fish, both served with rice, beans and plantain. The portions were huge, so if you do visit El Cibone, make sure you're ready for a big meal. Less than a 10-minute walk from the coffee shop was the glass-domed Key West Butterfly and Nature Conservatory. Here you can walk through a cloud of hundreds of vibrant butterflies taking flight all around you. There are also exotic birds and even 2 resident peacocks called Rhett and Scarlet. You can learn about butterfly biology, ecology and conservation, all while enjoying the lush tropical plants, mini waterfalls and, of course, colourful butterflies. While this is a great place for kids, I'm a certain number of years over 30 and still had the best time. And it looked like all the other adults were enjoying it too, so don't just write this off as a kiddie attraction. Included with our Conch Train ticket was admission to the Sails to Rails Museum, which we were told needed to be used on the same day as our Conch Train ticket. At this museum you'll learn the story of Key West, starting with the days of the wrecking industries. Then you'll learn about Henry Flagler, who built the overseas railroad from Miami all the way to Key West in the early 1900s. While this was partly to help tourists reach his fancy hotels, the railroad was a game changer for travel and trade and helped transform Key West into the major destination that it is today. This museum covers the good, the bad and the ugly of what it was like to work on the railroad, and finally, how the railroad met its tragic end. In the museum, there's also a scale model of Fort Jefferson in Dry Tortugas National Park. To visit the real thing, you do need to book ferry or seaplane tickets weeks in advance. We missed out on tickets by a matter of days, so if you do want to visit, then book tickets as soon as you know when you'll be in Key West. After the museum, we spent some time around the historic Seaport. We enjoyed strolling around this area quite a few times during our trip, eating and drinking, watching the boats, and keeping our eyes peeled for wildlife. At 4 p.m, there's a spot where you can watch tarpon feedings. I'll mark the feeding spot on this map I created with a fish symbol. We actually stumbled across somebody feeding the tarpon further along the dock after 6 p.m. So even if you missed the 4 p.m. feeding, you could still get the chance to watch it elsewhere. By the harbour, you'll also see the Whaling Wall, painted to raise awareness and appreciation of wildlife, so look out for that. If you're a Jimmy Buffett fan, you can walk by his recording studio, now covered in stickers and tributes to the musician. Even if you're not bothered by his music, it's still quite a cool sight. Of the many beautiful places to watch the sunset in Key West, we picked Mallory Square for our first sunset, given its renowned reputation. As we arrived, we were immediately drawn in by the fun atmosphere.
That was perfect timing. Try again. It's okay, Mira. We have all day. I am unemployed. Laugh it up, lady. I could have been your son. 3, 2, 1.
Not only was every sunset we watched on Key West a breathtaking sight, but watching the sun's final moments with a group of strangers all doing exactly the same thing creates a sense of camaraderie. If watching the sunsets with a big crowd isn't your thing though, then I will have some other suggestions for where to watch the sunset in our next Key West video. We started day 2 with what is perhaps the most touristy thing we could possibly do in Key West, getting our photo taken at the southernmost point Buoy. The Buoy is not actually located at the true southernmost point of the continental US. From what I've read, that spot is actually on private property a few blocks away. However, it is still a good photo op. When we got there wasn't much of a queue at all because it was only around 9:30 and it was not a cruise ship day, although if there is a big queue you could try just standing off to the side and taking a selfie if you don't mind other people in the background. From here we took a lovely morning walk around Bahama Village. This area is where the first Bahamian settlers arrived back in the 19th century. We enjoyed taking a stroll around this 16-block area before brunch. Small streets are lined with pastel-coloured homes of all different shapes and sizes, and tiny yards are filled with fun trinkets and cascading plants. Bahama Village includes top-rated restaurants, including Blue Heaven, which is particularly popular for breakfast. There is a lot of hype around this place, so we weren't surprised to be told there was a 45-minute wait by mid-morning. Still, being British, we love a good queue, so didn't mind. Plus they have a place you can wait over the road with a mimosa and live music. Once we were called to our table, we got the Lobster Benedict, although we shared this one between the two of us, mainly because we were saving ourselves for the star of the show, their famous key lime pie. The key lime custard filling wasn't too tart or too sweet, and was topped with a mountain of soft, fluffy meringue. This was one of several takes on key lime pie that we had to try during our visit. Yes, had to. And the Blue Heaven one was my favourite. Given the hype, I was expecting this place to not meet expectations, but it was actually great. That being said, I've seen reviews from people who've been in the past who say it's gone downhill, but as a first-time visitor, we loved it. After brunch, we climbed the 88 steps to the top of the Key West Lighthouse. The lighthouse, which opened in 1848, had a woman as its keeper, which was pretty unusual back then. The iron staircase led us to the top of the lighthouse, where we had a great 360-degree view across the island. After that, we went inside the small museum to learn more and, to be honest, to take advantage of some much-needed aircon. Over the road from the lighthouse is the former home of writer Ernest Hemingway, who lived in Key West back in the 1930s. Included in your admission is an optional guided tour where you can hear fascinating stories of Hemingway's life. Even if you're not a fan of Hemingway's work, then I do think it's still worth seeing the elegant house and grounds. Plus, the tour is packed with so many interesting tidbits, like why many of the cats you'll see around the property are said to have 6 toes, why this penny is stuck into the ground, and why there's a urinal in the back garden. From Hemingway's house, we continued walking slowly up Whitehead Street. It might not be as famous as its raucous neighbour Duval Street, which we'll come to later, but the leafy, mile-long Whitehead Street is somewhere we enjoyed strolling down many times on our trip. At the corner of Fleming Street and Whitehead Street, you'll find mile marker 0. This signals the end of US Route 1, which runs over 2,000 miles from Maine all the way to Key West. It does make for another good photo op, and unlike the southernmost point, never seemed to have a queue. Close to mile marker 0 is the Kapok Tree. Standing tall with its massive trunk and distinctive roots, the Kapok Tree is known for its impressive size and unusual appearance. While some people do find this tree more impressive than others, I thought it made for an interesting stop, even if you wouldn't go out of your way to see it. Depending on when you visit the Florida Keys, it can get really hot. You may notice that some days in our itinerary aren't as packed with as many activities as others. That's because quite often, by mid to late afternoon, the intense muggy heat would send us straight into relax and recharge mode. On those particularly toasty days, we would take advantage of happy hours, go for a swim in our resort pool, or relax on the balcony. I won't detail every time we did this because that would get quite repetitive, but it was an ideal way to spend those late afternoons. Key West is known for its bright, sparkling water, which you should take advantage of if you can. There's a ton of water activities available: jet skiing, kayaking, snorkelling, fishing, sunset cruises, sandbar trips, even these cool-looking floating tiki bars. We found it really hard to narrow down what to do as there were so many things we wanted to try, but we were very happy with the excursions that we did end up going with. Today's trip involved driving small 2-person boats through the mangroves and exploring gorgeous sandbars. After a short briefing on how to drive the boat, we followed our group captain. Zipping through the open water was exhilarating, and then idling through the mangroves gave us plenty of chance to look for wildlife. We then spent around 90 minutes visiting a couple of idyllic islands where we explored the trails and enjoyed beautiful, quiet beaches. We did do a bit of snorkelling, which was fun enough, but we went to a much better spot for snorkelling on another trip. Snorkelling wasn't really the focus of this excursion anyway, more just an optional thing to do around the islands if you wanted to. As this trip was just as much about the journey as it was the destination, I think if you're an experienced boater, you might not find this trip that exciting. However, if like us you have little or even no experience driving a boat, then this trip is perfect, as you get the fun of driving a boat combined with exploring stunning islands that you probably wouldn't have found on your own. If you're a seafood lover, then your stomach is going to have a good time in Key West. Once we were back on shore, we went to Hogfish, where we had their famous hogfish sandwich. The light fish was combined with sautéed onions, mushrooms and melted cheese in Cuban bread, and it was absolutely delicious. This was far from the only seafood we ate in Key West, as we had our fill of shrimp, oysters, plenty of fish, and we also tried conch fritters, which are a Key West appetizer staple that you will find everywhere. Conch fritters are savoury deep-fried balls made from seasoned batter of chopped conch meat, which is actually a type of large sea snail, mixed with vegetables and spices. Even if sea snails sound a bit gross to you, just trust me and give conch fritters a try. I'll cover restaurants and bars we enjoyed in our planning video because this video is going to be pretty long as it is. If you're looking for great bars or live music, then there's plenty of places to check out on or near Duval Street. We spent many balmy nights here, popping into bars we were drawn to and enjoying the fun atmosphere. Like I said, I will cover our favourite bars in the next video, but my absolute favourite bar, at least for music, was Dirty Harry's. The house band took requests from a seemingly massive back catalogue of rock, indie, punk, emo, new metal and more. This was definitely the first time I've ever seen a band going straight from playing Korn to The Who. We started the next morning with a quiet visit to Key West Cemetery. The cemetery was established in 1847, 16 feet above sea level after the original cemetery was unearthed during a storm. You can pick up a free map from the entrance or online that will help you navigate the labyrinth of plots and give a little bit of insight into some of the locals resting here, such as well-known residents like Sloppy Joe Russell, Key West's best-known barman. There's some unexpected humour thrown in with history, with effigies like, "I told you I was sick." The cemetery is also home to a monument dedicated to sailors who died in the explosion of the USS Maine in Havana Harbour. On the way to our next stop, we passed by the Key West Wildlife Centre. It's free to visit, so we decided to pop in. While visitors are welcome, the centre exists to help wildlife rather than be a tourist attraction, so set your expectations accordingly. Upon arrival, a friendly staff member enthusiastically told us about the facility and their work rescuing and rehabilitating birds. You can't see the birds currently being rehabilitated, but there was a small trail to walk along where you could spot other wildlife. If you're looking for somewhere peaceful and quiet, you can explore tropical gardens set in a Civil War fort at West Martello Tower and Garden Club. It's totally free to enter, although donations are appreciated. The whole place is so pretty and well maintained, it's the perfect spot to sit back and relax for a while. The gardens are also right by the small but very pretty Higgs Beach. The water here is such a beautiful colour. Walking along the pier and paddling in the warm waters was absolute bliss. If you're in the area from October to April, the There's an artisan market on Sundays near the gardens that looks really good. Our visit was in May, so we missed it, but I wanted to mention it anyway because it certainly looked like somewhere we would have liked to have gone had we been there at the right time of year. At Fort Zachary Taylor State Park, you can visit a historic fort, stroll along walking trails, and relax on a beach, all in one day. It was about a 20-minute walk from our hotel, although you could drive or cycle here if you prefer. Our first stop of the day was the fort itself. We arrived just in time for a free guided tour with a ranger, which runs every day at 11. The tour is great if you want to learn more about the history of the old Civil War fort. It was full of interesting nuggets of information, like why this is called the Powder Run and why these toilets were a colossal failure. After the fascinating tour, we walked one of the short trails, enjoying the foliage, the bonus view of the fort, and the much needed shade. The rest of the day was spent relaxing at the beach. You can rent chairs and umbrellas, or you could just throw down a towel. There's also plenty of shady picnic benches and barbecues, and there's a cafe for food and drink. The water was pretty wavy during our visit, so we didn't bother with any snorkelling, which we had read could actually be pretty decent here, but we did still enjoy just bobbing around in the warm water. You do want to set your expectations for Key West beaches, as they aren't the big, spacious, soft, sandy beaches you could find in other parts of Florida, but we did still think this beach was lovely nonetheless. One of our Key West highlights was taking a dolphin watching and snorkelling tour. It's going to be pretty hard to show you this tour, partly because filming long-distance dolphins on a rocking boat is pretty hard, and partly because I left the GoPro on the boat when we went snorkelling. However, because it was one of our favourite activities, I'm going to at least try to explain what you can do on this excursion. Our small group took a 4-hour trip out on the boat named Squid. The crew of 2 provided us with fruit and veggies and gave us lots of information on the local wildlife as we went out to find dolphins. While they can't guarantee you will see a dolphin, they do say there's a 90% chance that you'll see one, and we were happily part of that 90%. Once we found the dolphins, we watched them quietly from afar. The boat doesn't approach the dolphins or try to encourage them to come any closer with food or anything. I know this means it doesn't exactly look that exciting in the video, but it was really awesome to see them splashing around in person. For the snorkelling part of the trip, one of the guides joined us in the water and helped us find and identify tons of really cool fish, including quite a few stingrays. While the snorkelling was definitely better on this excursion than the first one, I thought the 2 boat tours we did complemented each other well. The first one gave us the fun of driving the boat and enjoying the beautiful sandbars, whereas the second gave us the better opportunity to see marine life. Nancy Forrester's secret garden is a small sanctuary for rescued parrots. The garden is home to around a dozen colourful birds, mainly macaws with a few African greys as well. Nancy, who's an artist and sustainability activist, has been rescuing orphaned parrots for around 30 years. If you visit at 10 a.m, you can hear Nancy talk about the parrots and ask her any questions you might have. We ended up spending around 90 minutes here, chatting with Nancy and one of the volunteers. Both were so incredibly passionate about the birds and shared lots of interesting facts and stories. So, for example, Nancy hadn't originally planned to start a sanctuary. Her journey began when the first birds were abandoned on her land. We were told all of them had been bred in captivity and then abandoned, so none of them had learned to fly, although some potentially still could in the future if they wanted to. We were also told that most of the parrots aren't trained to a high level. This is because if they were, and this high-level training then didn't continue once they're eventually rehomed, then they would become really distressed. Next, we explored the USCGC Ingham, a historic Coast Guard cutter launched in 1936. This remarkable ship survived both the Second World War and the Vietnam War. A self-guided tour will take you all around the ship, where you can see different areas like the captain's quarters, the petty officer's lounge, a small medical area, and even a barber shop. You could also get some good views from the telescope on the deck. Our next stop was Truman Little Whitehouse. The Little Whitehouse is set in a secluded, well-manicured neighbourhood known as Truman Annex that was originally built in 1845 as part of Fort Zachary Taylor. The Little Whitehouse is where President Harry S. Truman spent 175 days of his presidency on working vacations, following doctor's orders to spend more time in a warm climate. You can enter the grounds for free and enjoy a small complimentary exhibition, or you can pay for a 40-minute guided tour inside. We were initially hesitant about the tour because of how much it cost given the length, but we decided to go for it and we were glad that we did. Our guide showed us around the various rooms where Truman lived and worked and shared funny anecdotes along the way. In the late afternoon, we visited Key West's first legal rum distillery. If you go to the distillery, you can get a short but free tour. The tours start at midday and run throughout the afternoon. Our two friendly guides took us through the small distillery and shared the process of how they make their supposedly no hangover rum. Whether you take the tour or not, you can still sample their rums in the bar or purchase cocktails or souvenir bottles to take home with you. They have ones that are just the right size for the plane. While I do hope this video gives you plenty of ideas for things to do in Key West, I wouldn't suggest making a strict itinerary. Instead, gather ideas for a loose plan, but give yourself plenty of time to just go with the flow. Even with 7 days, we didn't cover everything in Key West, most notably Dry Tortugas, which I mentioned earlier. In the description below, I've linked a free written guide and map covering everything mentioned in this video, so I hope you find them useful. Thanks for watching.